Hello, friends. My name is Howard Storm, and I'm the author of this book, My Descent into Death. And today we're discussing chapter 5, Life Review. My near-death experience was in 1985. I wrote this book in 1999. It was published in 2000 in England, and then in 2005 it was published in the United States, and it's still being printed and still selling. It's published in a lot of languages all over the world, and done hundreds of interviews talking about my near-death experience, which you can find on YouTube. There's a link to some of that on my website, which is howardstorm.com. There's a YouTube channel called Howard Storm, and if you just Google Howard Storm, you find all kinds of links to things that I've done. And I want to thank Corioto for having the interest and the time and the energy to do this series on this book, My Descent into Death, which I think gives a really fair and concise overview of my near-death experience. When I wrote it, I wanted it to be simple and clear and available to the general audience. So despite my academic background and my seminary training in theology, I didn't want to sound like a professor or an academician. I just wanted to sound like the person I was when I had the near-death experience in 1985. Just a guy like any other guy whose life was changed when he had this big crisis in his life, and God intervened and literally saved my life and turned my life around, which I've been trying to make appropriate adjustments in my character ever since. And believe me, it's been a daily struggle to try and live up to the expectations that God has given to me, both through my near-death experience and through my study of Scripture, and through my daily contact with people. Because to summarize it, the whole point of this is love is the lesson, to learn how to love one another, how to love God, and how to love one another. That's what it's all about. That's what I'm trying to do. And it sounds so simple, sounds so easy, and it's the biggest challenge I face in my life. And I imagine that it's the biggest challenge that everybody else faces in their lives. One of the things that keeps me going is that I meet really good people who seem to have met the task of learning how to be kind, loving, good people. And I want to be like them. So they're my heroes. And some of my heroes will never get any fame or acknowledgement much from this world because they're just simple, humble people. And where I tend to run into those people is in my church that I am a member of, and in the churches that I've served, and in the people that identify themselves as Christians. And when I've traveled around the world, I've met people who embody this, who are not Christians, but follow the Christian way in their own faiths all over the world. Anyways, just wanted to say that little introductory remark. This life review chapter is difficult for me to talk about because, to put it in the simplest terms, I flunked the course. if I were to give myself a grade on how I did in my life review, I would definitely give it a F, failure, not a D, poor, not a C, average, not a B, good, not an E, excellent, F. It was a very, very painful experience. And I do not anticipate doing that again the next time I go home. Some people call that dying. I call it going home. Because I don't think, two reasons. One, I don't think it's really necessary for me to have the same life review. I'm going to have a life review of what did I do from 1985 on. And I hope to get, I'd like to get a B grade. I'd like to get a, little pat in the back, like a little good try, attaboy, and the other thing is that Jesus told me very clearly that when we confess our sins and repent and pray for forgiveness, those sins are erased. So one of the things that I would like you to get out of me talking about my life review is you can change your life review. You can edit it, just like it were a videotape. You can go in and snip out the parts that you confess and repent and ask forgiveness for. You can take them right out of your life review. That's really good news. You can clean it up. You could do it today. So you could edit it down and just leave all the good stuff that you remember and take out all the bad stuff. I urge you to do it because my life review took place. One, I was in the arms of Jesus holding me. And two, I was surrounded by a group of about 8 angels. I call them angels that Jesus told me had been with me all my life. We all don't have one guardian angel. We all have a team of angels. And they all have their specialities, and they all have their individualities and their own interests. So some of them are over our life for this particular characteristic and instance, and then others are involved in other things. There's people that are more knowledgeable about angels than I am, and I've read them with great deal of interest. And the ones that I know and respect and have read all talk about the team and how they work in different ways in our lives. And they're around, and they are intercessors for us. They are not our servants. They're servants of God, and they only do what God wants them to do. So one of the ways that angels actually suffer in our relationship with us is God frequently tells them not to intervene. Why does God do that? Not because God's cruel, but God knows that the only way we're going to learn the lessons of this world is by experiencing the consequences of those lessons, including suffering the consequences of those lessons, if that's what the lesson's going to teach us. Suffering is one of the great teachers of this world. And by suffering, I'm not talking about just physical suffering. I'm talking about emotionally suffering. Acts of cruelty produce emotional, psychological suffering. Acts of kindness produce emotional, psychological rewards, because we're all in relationship, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not. We're all in relationship with all the people that we encounter in our lives, from the most casual meetings to the most profound meetings. And we're all flawed human beings. And one of the reasons why we're flawed human beings, God didn't make us to be flawed, but God gave us free will. And we all have learned from our environment how to interact. And unfortunately, a lot of us have very imperfect parents and siblings and families. And a lot of times we learn some very inappropriate ways to interact. The sad thing is that we carry those inappropriate behaviors into our adulthood and into our adult relationships when we should theoretically know better. I mean, I'll just give you an obvious example. Like when you're a little kid, every kid tries the strategy of a trauma. You know, throw a fit, get your way, you know, yell and scream and throw yourself on the floor and you know, pound the floor with your fist and, you know, refuse to listen to anybody and not get comforted and, you know, just act like a crazy person. If that's indulged, we adopt that strategy as an adult. We don't necessarily throw ourselves on the floor and pound the floor and scream and yell, but we exhibit our anger in other ways. And I certainly was guilty in my life review of demonstrating my anger in very dramatic ways that terrified my wife and my kids and traumatized them. Anyways, so I want to go back to my life review, although I'd rather not talk about it, frankly. I'm going to do it anyways. So I saw when I was born, and I saw the happiness of my parents. My dad had come back from serving in the United States Navy during World War II. And I had two older sisters, which my father had seen very little of because he was in the Pacific when they were little bitty girls. And my dad really wanted a son, which is, you know, not untypical of men. They want to have a son to carry on the name. My father used to say that you're carrying on the name, you know, ooh, whatever that means. And I saw such joy with my mother and father when I was born. The fact of the matter is, because of their blood types, doctors had told them that my mother couldn't have a third child. And in fact, after me, she had a miscarriage, and they gave up on having more than 3 kids. Although my mom would have liked to have had more, it was not possible because of the incompatibility of their blood types. So I was kind of like a real big surprise that I survived the pregnancy and born a big healthy kid. I was born October 26, 1946 in Newton, Massachusetts, and just where my family lived. And my dad had a job as a salesman with General Mills Corporation in the bakery products division, which was primarily flour. He sold flour for a living. And we had a little house. I don't know if this means anything. It was called a cape. That was the style of the house, little 2-story house. And the second floor had like very steep, narrow attic stairs up to it. And my father and his friends made that into 2 bedrooms. So at one end of the attic was my bedroom, and at the other end of the attic was where my two sisters slept. And then downstairs, my mother and father had their bedroom. Um, it was a cute little house, um, built like right after the war for the um, guys coming back from the war. So the suburb was like almost all veterans and all about the same age and new families. So there were lots of kids, lots of interaction amongst the people. Back in those days, like people didn't have cocktail parties. I mean, first of all, these were like people kind of struggling to achieve a middle class existence. These weren't wealthy people, and there were some people that didn't have automobiles. We were lucky because my father got a company car. He didn't actually own a vehicle, but he had a company car. So it was great because every 3 years he'd get a new car. So we were pretty cool, get a new Ford every year. Just struggling to get by. We're not that well off. One time I asked my dad when I was a teenager age, I said, "Do you make $10,000 a year?" And he like, "Hell no, I wish I made $10,000 a year." Of course, I'm going back to like the early 60s. So I don't know exactly what he made, but wasn't a lot. Anyways, my dad was a hardworking guy, and my memories of my childhood and what I saw in my life review is a pretty good, happy family. The only thing that I saw that was a little bit sour was my dad had been a Lieutenant JG in the Navy, and when he came back, he wanted to run the house by Navy standards. So he was a very stern disciplinarian, very stern. Just to give you a little idea what it means is when we sat at the dinner table, he enforced you had to sit upright, no elbows on the table, and you had to eat your food square, which means you take a bite of food on your fork, you lift up vertically, and then you bring it horizontally to your mouth. Then you put your fork back down on the plate, leave it on the plate, and chew your food. And we had to eat every bite on our plate. We couldn't leave the table until our plate was clean. And the hard part was like my mom would serve us something like asparagus or broccoli, but both of which I like now. But as a kid, I hated them. I thought they tasted awful. And not only would I get that on the plate, because neither my mother and father asked us what we wanted. I mean, it's just like the stuff was just put on your plate. But my mom would then give seconds, whether you wanted them or not, including broccoli and asparagus and things like that. So it was a happy childhood, and then things began to change. And what I saw happening in my life review, which I wasn't that aware of as a child, but this is what they were showing me, was my father got a promotion to being the sales manager of his division, which meant I think he had about 8 or 9 people working under him. And now he was the boss. And instead of like working kind of like 9 to 5, 5 days a week, now he was working like 7:30 to 8 o'clock at night. A lot of times 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, because he was so very quickly got very, very stressed out at work. So like things that had been fun, which I saw in my life review as a kid, me and my 2 sisters working with my dad in the yard, raking leaves, mowing the lawn, trimming the grass with little hand clippers and things like that, going out for ice cream on Sunday afternoon, driving to some cool ice cream place and get an ice cream cone, visiting relatives. We did a lot of visiting relatives. All that stuff began to change. And my father, before my near-death experience, before my life, I had no appreciation for what he was going through. None. I mean, basically, I thought my father just became a horrible human being, a monster. I hated him for what he became. He had no patience. He was, the discipline got like really random and arbitrary. He started hitting me and my sisters a lot. And I'm talking about very frequently, not exactly daily, but certainly weekly, yelling, screaming, threatening, things like that. To say this was not endearing me to him is a gross understatement. What I saw was me hating him. So how did I respond to all this? I became more and more surly, emotionally disconnected from him. I mean, I'm saying, I hated him. And like, how could he not pick up the vibes, his son now, 10, 12, 13 years old was like not his buddy anymore. And things just went from bad to worse to more awful in our dysfunctional relationship. It was a real huge eye opener because he'd always been the perpetrator of all this badness, and I was the victim. And yes, what he did was inexcusable, but when I saw why it was happening to him, why he was changing, I then began to see how I changed in my relationship to him. And we were in a downward spiral in our relationship. My mom, who grew up in an extremely strict Finnish Lutheran household with a very dominant father, my grandfather, she was completely passive. And when me and my sisters went and complained to my mother about my dad, she'd say, he's your father. You have to love him. You've got to be obedient to him. Don't complain about him. There's nothing you can do, just do what he tells you. I'm just like, thanks, Mom. Boy, that was really not supportive, Matter of fact, it got so bad. My sisters and I, when we were teens, used to tell my mom, please leave him, please get a divorce, get out of here, it's awful. But she wouldn't even think about doing anything like that. That just was not in her character at all. So I got to see how the whole family dynamics developed. And I got a great appreciation from my dad. Jesus and the angels never scolded me or told me I was bad or wrong or anything like that. They expressed their emotions at what we were watching. And all of this made them very sad. They loved my dad. They loved my mom. They loved my sisters. They loved me. And to see this whole thing going sour just really, hurt them enormously. But because of free will, they couldn't fix it. They couldn't change it. So my mother and father weren't into church that much, but because of the culture at that time, like, I'm sure it's not true, but it seemed like everybody went to church on Sunday. I'm talking about back in the 50s and early 60s. Church was just what you did on Sunday. We had blue laws, which meant everything was closed on Sunday. It was really hard to find gasoline or a bottle of milk or a loaf of bread, and you couldn't buy anything else. All the stores were closed in Massachusetts on Sunday because of blue laws. Anyways, so they would drop us off at church most of the time. And I went to Sunday school, and I loved Sunday school because we had these wonderful women who were giving up their Sunday morning rather than being with their families, down in church, having a good time. They were up with a bunch of kids, And so we got like Bible stories and Bible lessons, and we printed stuff. But primarily, the big thing that we did was crafts. We did lots. We did lots of little artsy, craftsy projects in Sunday school, and that was my thing. I loved it. You know, and I was good at it, and got lots of compliments from the teachers. That, you know, because when we'd get into the craft projects, it was like, I mean, I was all in 100%. You know, want to do this stuff. I believed in this guy named Jesus, took it pretty seriously, and I really liked church. And of course, there was no abusive behavior in my church. It was just a lot of really nice people. And we used to, in Sunday school, one of the things that we did that was really, really big was we had our children's church. We had a little chapel up on the second floor of the wing of the church that had all the Sunday school classes. And there were a lot, like hundreds of kids in Sunday school back in those days. And our class would get to go in and do children's church. It was about a 10-minute service. And the big deal was if you were really, really, really good, you got selected to light the candles on the altar and say, Jesus Christ said, I am the light of the world. Whoever believes in me shall not walk in darkness, but shall walk in the light of life. And that meant a lot to me. And a couple times I got selected to light the candles and to say that. And that was a biggie in my life. So anyways, what happens, age of 14, I'm active in church. I'm not just going to church, but in, you know, like called it Junior Pilgrim Fellowship, JPF, you know, the evening thing with a bunch of other young teenagers and stuff like that. And lots of fun. And the pastor and I became very friendly. But my sisters, who both were older than me, had stopped going to church because they thought church was really boring and stupid. And my sisters were becoming pretty wild. They were lying to my parents all the time and going out with dates with older guys, and drinking a lot, which my parents had no idea what they were doing. But I did. And so it's like this huge disconnect in my mind between the direction my sisters were going in and me being a good little churchy guy. And my pastor said to me that he thought I had the call to go into ministry. And I was like, wow, maybe I'll be a minister like him someday. This is at like the age of 14. And then this thing with my father kept getting worse and worse. And one time I went to my minister at the age of 15. And I said, I didn't want to talk about my father. I talked to him about like stuff that they taught in church, stuff like the angels and Jesus being the Son of God and the Bible true and all that stuff. And I asked him all these questions. And the minister said, no, those are all myths. We don't really believe that those things are true. We just believe that, I mean, the point is you're supposed to be a good person. At the end of that conversation, I stopped going to church. It's like, okay, church, I mean, how I interpreted that conversation, church is all a lot of hypocrisy. They say all this stuff in church, but they don't believe it. And if the point is to be good, I don't need to go to church to hear that every week or twice a week. You know, I get your point. You know, what I thought was good was like, I'll do what I think is good for me. You know, nobody's going to tell me what's good. You know, kissing girls and heavy petting, bad? No, good. You know, I mean, you know, don't tell me how to interact with girls. I'm going to, you know, go as far as they'll let me go, you know, with them, etc. Anyways, so I adopted the lifestyle of my sisters. I had a double life, like try and con my parents into thinking I was being this good little boy, but in fact, I was drinking and partying and chasing girls. So I'm talking about the age of 15, stuff like that. In fact, when I was 15 years old, I ran away from home, went and lived with a woman in New York City for 4 months, which was quite an adventure. Anyhow, just barely managed to get through high school. My junior year of high school, I attended 30 days, but fortunately, because I had a really good guidance counselor, she got the teachers to have sympathy and got passed just barely in the classes. But I was real smart, so I could pass the tests. Even though I didn't attend school, my senior year, I was like rarely there. Barely made it. I barely graduated. My grade point average was awful. My father insisted on me going to college in Ohio to a school that he had no association with, but a man who he had served in the Navy with was very keen on. So I went to a college that I didn't want to go to because I wanted to be an artist, and my father didn't want me to be an artist, and the school had very paltry art program. I continued my wild lifestyle at college, flunked a whole bunch of classes because I didn't attend them. I mean, a sociology class I went to once and I never went back. I should have dropped it, but I didn't care enough to even drop it. I just flunked it and stuff like that. Met the woman that I was soon to marry, and we were having a ferociously romantic relationship. Trying to find places to have our intimacy was always a struggle on a college campus, but we managed to find them. One time, a telephone booth in the hallway of her dorm, which is pretty brazen. Anyways, Jesus and the angels are not good. They weren't disapproving of my total obsession with sexuality. What they were disapproving of was that my relationships were purely for my own gratification. Everything I was doing was about me gratifying myself. And right after college, 18 years old, we got married. She was pregnant. What a surprise. I got a job my dad got me a job in a bakery, whoopee, downtown Boston. And we had a little tiny apartment. We paid $50 a month rent. So you can imagine what kind of an apartment it was. And I was also the janitor of the building. That's one of the reasons why the rent was so cheap. So I had to keep the hallways clean and take out the trash, empty everybody's trash cans with the put outside the door. And I did fixer-upper stuff in the building and stuff like that. My being married life. Jesus and the angels are excited about me being married and about us having a baby. About me being a hardworking young man, 18 years old, and I got to live like an adult now. Didn't have a car, couldn't afford a car. Our big expense, because we were so poor, was on Sunday afternoon. We'd go to an ice cream store and share an ice cream together. That was our big expense. And we were trying to save money because a big goal in life was to save up enough money to buy a car. But at the time I was making $2.50 an hour. So with we were actually saving a pretty fair amount of what I was making. One of the things I was good at the bakery, I was getting a lot of overtime, which up to my weekly paycheck. Anyhow, so Jesus and the angels were like, okay, family, fatherhood, hard work, you know, you get, you're growing up, becoming a man, doing a good life. And then, anyways, make a long story short, I decided I want to go to San Francisco, California to study art, I wanted to be an artist. And everyone said this is like in the mid 60s, and everyone was saying San Francisco is like where it's at. Hello. I wanted to go where it's at. And there were some artists out there that were doing it's called Bay Area figurative art. And I wanted to do that. So we took all our worldly possessions in a $500 Ford, which was a total piece of junk. And everything we owned fit in the car. Baby, wife, and me. And I drove from Boston to San Francisco in 3.5 days. Didn't sleep a wink the whole time. It's a long drive, by the way. It's about 3,000 miles. When we got to San Francisco, my wife's best friend from high school had an apartment there, and got to the apartment, and I slept for a day and a half. That last day or two, I was just a zombie, because I hadn't slept. Anyhow, we didn't have any money for motels, or had hardly any money for food. When I got to San Francisco, I had $70. Anyhow, pretty soon, my wife first and then me got a job in the same restaurant as servers. I enrolled at the San Francisco Art Institute. Loved it. I worked 35 hours a week at the restaurant. I worked from 10 at night till 4 in the morning. My wife worked from 5 at night till 9 in the evening. She walked home from the restaurant, and as soon as she came in the door, I left and walked down to the restaurant. And I went to school my classes start at 9 a.m. And I went to school. A lot of my classes went to 5, but I always had to leave a little after 4 to get home in time for her to go to work, because I had to take care of the baby. And some of my teachers didn't like that I always left, class an hour early, but so I had to do what I had to do. Anyways, got through, graduated from the San Francisco Art Institute, and we went across the bay to Berkeley graduate school, and I got my MA and my MFA, got a job in Kentucky as an art professor, and now my life was to begin. But as my career developed, both as an artist and as a professor at the Unity, I'm getting more and more self-centered. I have less and less time for my family. I mean, a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times my family is just really annoying because they wanted attention. They wanted me to participate with them and play and do things that I didn't want to do. And I was too busy. I had art to make. I had my responsibilities. So I became the head of the art department and ruled over, with a pretty firm hand, ruled over a department of artists. And Jesus and the angels are like showing me and expressing to me with their feelings how disappointed and what a jerk I'm becoming. My philosophy was, it's a dog eat dog world, and you have to be the biggest, baddest dog to get ahead. So to say I was an A-type personality was, I was the poster boy for an A-type personality, and I got my way. And if people contradicted me, I'd threaten them. I was 6'2", weighed 230 pounds. I'd been a football player in high school and stuff like that. And I know how to intimidate people physically, and I used it, and I did it. I mean, it's real simple. Move in close and act in a threatening and talk in a threatening way, and people back down. You know. Anyhow, I got nothing but disapproval from Jesus and the angels. The thing that neglecting my family was bad, and the other thing that I did that was really painful was I liked the students, but they were also annoying because they wanted more attention. They were, like they wanted to talk to me after class and, talk about their girlfriends and their boyfriends and like their mothers and fathers and their brothers and sisters. And like, I just found that all like, I gotta listen to this crap all the time from these kids. Like, I'm not paid to be their counselor, but I'd sit there and like listen and, go, oh, that's too bad. Sorry to hear that. I don't know. They were looking for an adult. Like I'm in my 20s. Okay. But to me, I was an adult. I was an authority figure. I was someone that would be sympathetic to them because I was their art teacher. And I acted the part, but I really wasn't into it. Just wasn't into it. I was just hypocrite. So the thing that's sad is I became what my father was, not with the cruelty, but just a big bad actor guy. An actor who acted nice, who wasn't nice. And that very much displeased Jesus. So as my life review's going on, I'm trying to get them to look at my successes, like promotions and awards and, prizes and things like that, and recognition and things like that. And every time one of those things would come up in my life, they would say, we don't need to see that. Those things aren't important. What we want you to see is how you treated your daughter, how you treated your son, how you treated your wife, how you treated the student that came to you for help. And in the life review, and you hear this from a lot of people that have had near-death experiences, you not only see these things and experience them, but you get to feel what the other people felt that you're interacting with. And that was really, really hard. And many, many times during my life review, I said to Jesus and the angels, I don't want to see any more of this. I don't want to see this. I don't like it. I hate it. And say, you need to watch it. You need to see it. And they wouldn't let me off the hook. And we watched the whole thing. When it was over, I was so glad that it was over because I hated it. I really hated my life review. I realized that I had completely failed. So to put it as simply as possible, they had wanted me to be a compassionate, kind, caring human being. And I was not. I didn't break the law. I didn't go to jail. I paid my taxes. If you'd asked me if I was a good human being, I'd say, what do you mean I'm a good human being? Obviously, I'm a good human being. I'm a college professor. I got a house. I got kids. I got cars. I earn my living. I don't get nothing for free. Everything I have, I earned, the hard way through hard work. What do you mean am I a good person? Of course, I'm a good person. But that's not what they meant by being a good person. It's like what's inside of you, how much compassion, love do you show to other people? So I'm telling you, if you want a good life review, this is from the Bible, put the needs and interests of other people ahead of your own. That's what it means. And there's a lot of people in the world that do that, and there's a whole lot of people that don't. And how much money you make and how big your house is and how many cars you have and where you go on vacation and the jewelry and the clothing you're wearing doesn't mean nothing to God. Nothing. God doesn't care a bit about your displays of wealth or success. What he does care about is how you treat other people, beginning with your family and then going on to your work, your neighbors, the people that you run into. So I'm begging you, don't have a lousy life review. You're not going to like it. Have a good one. And I told you how to do it. So that's the end of that chapter. Corey told me that he had a couple questions that came in that I'm going to try and respond to.
Okay. Hoping my life review will be good. I don't know. I'm a little scared. The questions were, one was about a gentleman asked about Darwinism. If you discussed that with Jesus or the angels, like the evolution.
I mean, the truth is, no, we never discussed it.
Okay. So do you have any like any comments or anything on that theory, or do you have any background on that, or?
I believe in, and this is, you can look this up on the internet. I believe in intelligent design, that God is the designer of the universe, but he doesn't micromanage it.
So with Darwinism, I understand that it's a process, an evolution of human beings in this case. And the Bible states with Adam and Eve, were they created, like they were created in the image of God, but were they like ape form and then became what we are today, or were they what we are today?
No, the way I understand it is that there were human beings, Homo sapiens, but they were not in the image of God, meaning they didn't have reason, self-awareness. They didn't know, didn't have any of God characteristics. I'm talking about like intellectual, spiritual, emotional character. They were animals. They were Homo sapiens, but they're animals. Actually, I can prove that there were people around because, like, when Adam and Eve had 2 sons, they married. Where'd the wives come from? They didn't marry apes. They married Homo sapiens. Adam and Eve's wives were Homo sapiens. There were Homo sapiens on Earth. But anyways, but I do believe that God used this couple. And the interesting thing is that geneticists, modern geneticists, say that every human being on this earth came from the same mother and father.
So would that be, you say there's Homo sapiens, so the sons and daughters of Adam and Eve, if they were to procreate with some of these other Homo sapiens that weren't in the image of God, would that not pollute the image of God, taking something that's not of God with something that is God?
That's beyond my pay rank. I don't know how to answer that.
Okay, on to the next one then, because I know you only get a certain amount of time. About free will. I think this gentleman was saying that you and Emmanuel Sweetenberg both agree that children who die before becoming adults go to heaven. So does that eliminate their free will, or do they still have free will? They just haven't developed into it yet, or?
Yeah, free will is one of the big ways that we are in the image and likeness of God. And by the way, animals don't have free will. There was a famous Russian psychologist called Pavlov, and he said that everything is stimulus response and human beings are just animals and everything we do stimulus response. Pavlov has been totally discredited now because we have free will and because we have a mind that's able to conceptualize things. People are quite unpredictable. You never know what they're going to do. You can offer a person a whole lot of money and they may or may not be tempted by it. You can put a gun to a person and they may or not be afraid of it. You just don't know what people are going to do because they have free will and they have God-given ability. Animals are so, I'm an animal lover. I got a dog. I've always had dogs, had cats and stuff like that. They are so predictable, I mean, a dog will do anything for a treat, anything, including jump off a cliff if you wanted them
Pretty extreme, eh?
Mm.
It's funny though, because they will. The last thing was on the topic of hell. I'm just going to read you quickly what this gentleman states so that you can kind of understand what he means. He states he understood that hell exists because mankind was given free will. However, despite the knowledge, I have a really hard time understanding how it could have been a provision in God's plan. So the Bible says that people who go to hell after death go there forever because a great chasm has been set in place. Sweetenberg says that there's a dominant love that remains in each of us after death and never changes for eternity. So it seems impossible that somebody could exist forever in torment. So basically, what he's asking, does Jesus have a plan to eventually redeem people from hell?
to. Yes, not that everybody will be redeemed from hell, because some people will never accept Jesus's love. But the Bible says that when Jesus was crucified, he went to hell and he preached in hell and rescued people from hell. That's in the Bible. My experience was I went to hell. I called out to Jesus and he rescued me from hell. So like both from personal experience and from biblical knowledge. The other thing is that the word that's interpreted or translated as eternal, in fact, is a mistranslation. What the word that is translated as eternal actually means is for that amount of time. And that amount of time can mean a second, a minute, a day, a week, a year, a month, 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years. But when we think of eternal, we think of something with no end to it, like forever and ever and ever and ever. The Bible never, ever says that, ever. Look into it.
So does eternity not exist then?
How would I know? You'd have to be God to answer that.
Yeah, true enough. The other thing, my brother Dennis and I, that's his name, he was we were speaking here and he asked me, he made a statement in the form of a question, I guess. He asked me, he had reviewed your videos and other people's near-death experience videos. He used Eben Alexander, the neurosurgeon that had a near-death
Yeah.
experience. He
Yeah.
wanted to know how come each person that he's studied, how come each one seems so different? Like you guys don't all have a very similar near-death experience. I figured it was just because we're individuals, right? We don't all have the same life experience.
Yeah, you pretty much it. It's not only are we all different, but when we come back, the near-death experience is ineffable, which means, I mean, you see and hear and experience so much that can't be understood and can't be expressed. But we want to talk about it. We want to put it into words. We want to understand it. Everyone comes back with their own cultural upbringing and their own background. Because of my experience was with Jesus, even Alexander, as far as I know, didn't have any experience with Jesus. His was with a butterfly. I'm not trying to put him down. I'm just saying that's what I understand from his experience. Anyways, I got totally interested in Christianity, totally interested in the Bible. As soon as I was able, I started going to a Christian church, joined the church, got very involved in the church, and within 3 years was ordained a lay minister. As soon as I became a lay minister, I started going to seminary so that I could learn more about Christianity, Christian theology. Went to seminary for 3.5 years so that I could articulate in a way that people could understand. Christianity is the prevalent culture of the United States of America, the culture that I was born and raised in. I know that if I'd been born and raised in India, I would probably be something different. I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia, I'd be something different. But no, this is who I am. This is my English is my language. The United States is my culture. Christianity's the overwhelmingly prevailing religion. And this is how I know, how I speak, how I understand. So I get that. I mean, I get that. A lot of me is a product of my culture. I think other cultures and other religions are really fascinating, but the more I've traveled and experienced other cultures, the more I'm aware that, like, I don't understand them. I've been working with a tribe of Maya Indians in Belize, Central America for 20 years now, and I'm still trying to figure them out. They're real different. I mean, they eat, they sleep, they get married, they have babies, they build houses, they work jobs, just like we do. But you know what? The more you get to know them, the more you realize they're really different, or I'm really different. We're different, and I'm trying to understand them. You know,
So would they have to have accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior before they'd have a chance at redemption, or is that just something that's really
no,
kind of
what they have to do is they have to love God with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love their neighbor as themselves, as Jesus teaches in the Gospels.
what if
If
they
you do
haven't?
that,
Sorry,
if you do that, you're following Jesus.
okay, so they don't actually have to say I'm following Jesus; they're just going to follow his guideline.
Yeah, because when Jesus tells us to follow me, he means follow his teaching. He doesn't mean just make some words with your lips and say, "Oh, I believe in Jesus," and then do what you want to do. You know, one of the big problems with Christianity is too many people that like say, "Oh, I believe in Jesus, I'm a Christian," but they don't do what he tells us that we need to do, which is love God with everything you got and love your neighbor. Bunch of hypocrites.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And you know what? He speaks really harshly about those hypocrites. Read Matthew 25 sometime and find out what happens to them. They don't go to heaven, they go to hell.
Do they have a chance at redemption once they get there?
Sure.
So everybody does. So why would somebody want to stay in hell? Like, what was be the purpose of that? They reject God, but once you're in
Okay.
torment,
Well, that's a really good question, because like, why would someone want to stay in hell? But like, if you're ever dealt with an alcoholic or a drug addict, and you're not, like, what you want to say to them is, you need to stop drinking, or you need to stop taking oxycodone, or, methamphetamine, or whatever it is you're, addicted to. If you do that, you know what you're going to get? Blasted, cussed out, told to mind your own effing business, and they're going to do what they're going to do. The only time they can change is when they seek the help of God, and that is the first step of every 12-step program.
yeah, but
It's like I'm helpless against alcoholism, but I can with the help of God.
so being I would say a former alcoholic is what I'd classify myself as, because I don't drink at all now. But when you're drinking and you're in that, you're in your cups, you're in torment, and you want to get out of it. So with somebody who was in hell that was in that same torment, if the opportunity to call out to Jesus was there, why wouldn't they? Or do they just not know?
Pride.
Pride. So pride is going to allow them to be tormented.
Yeah, but they're just bringing it upon themselves. It's
I
terrible.
find that hard to understand why anybody would want to be tormented. It just, I don't know. I understand what you're saying, but I just like the
But
whole.
you already said alcoholics are in torment. Why do they want to be tormented?
A lot of the times they don't. They want to get out. They just don't know how.
Well, it's not that hard to call upon God. All you got to do is just do it.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, one other thing, I know you got to go, so I'll make this one quick. There was a gentleman I was dialoguing with. We'll say he states that Jesus had the victory over Satan and the demons and death.
Yeah.
Now he states that Satan's not here anymore. He didn't say where he was at.
It's not true. Jesus' victory over death and Satan had power over death and over who went to hell and who didn't. Jesus defeated that power, but Satan is very much alive and active. I know. I've met him. I've dealt with him. I've struggled with him, and so haven't millions of other people that I've talked to. He's to say he's no longer around in this world influencing people, that's so naive. I wish it were true, but it's not true.
So what
But
does,
he can't make you do anything, as F. Scott Peck said, who was a psychoanalyst who became a Christian after studying evil. He wasn't before, but when he studied evil, he came to the conclusion that the only power Satan has is the power we give it.
by giving into his temptations and things like that, you mean? Or
Yeah,
so do people not still die? Like you say, he had power over death, but Jesus defeated that. Do you mean
I died.
spiritually?
I died. The minute I died, I came to a greater life than I've ever had before.
Understood.
So, does our physical body die, but do we die? No, we get resurrected.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I know it's getting on your time, so I do appreciate you answering my questions. Sometimes I feel like I'm drilling you, and I don't mean to do that.
No, don't hesitate.
All right. Well, that was the chapter of review. So the next one, I'm not sure which one it is just off the top of my head here, but we'll hit it up again next week if you have
Great.
any. You're good with
Okay.
that? All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks very much for doing this, Howard, and I'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you, Corey, for doing it.
You're
God
welcome.
bless you.
God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.